Welcome to Community Dialogue, where we bring together leaders and voices from across our business community to discuss the issues shaping our workforce and our future. I'm Christy Chewning with Central Georgia EMC. I'm the host of Community Dialogue, and I would like to thank Kaiser Permanente for being our sponsor for this program. In recognition of Women's History Month, today's conversation focuses on leadership challenge known as the Broken Rung. While many people talk about a glass ceiling, research shows the real barrier often happens earlier when employees are first considered for management roles. When talented women miss the first step on the leadership ladder, the entire leadership pipeline suffers. Joining me today to explore this topic are two outstanding leaders. We have Charles Moon, Vice President and Financial Inclusion Leader at Truist Bank, and leadership speaker and advocate Elaine Beattie. Thank you for joining us.
So my name is Charles Moon. I am Vice President for Financial Inclusion here at Truist, and happy to be here today. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
Thank you, Charles. Elaine?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Robinson Beattie, and I am a leadership readiness expert, speaker, and executive coach.
Thank you. Elaine, I want to ask you, many people hear about the glass ceiling, but fewer know about the broken rung. What does that term mean, and why does it matter so much?
Well, in order to get to the glass ceiling, we've got to take a staircase, and oftentimes you cannot just jump over the next step. And so when a step is missing or broken, we need to make sure that we put it back in place and that it's stable. By that, I mean for women or those who might be experiencing some kind of inequity in advancing to the next level, we need to make sure that there's a solid foundation. And for that, I mean, we need to make sure that women are prepared and ready to take the next step.
So, Charles, how does this show up inside organizations when leadership promotions are being considered?
All right, so I think a crucial statistic is for every 100 men who are promoted to manager, there's only about 87 women that are. I think that this directly talks about that broken rung. I think that it's very important that we really focus in on those numbers and try to figure out how do we get those numbers to be a little bit more in line. And those numbers get even more daunting when you talk about minorities in hiring practices. And so when we talk about trying to make sure that that occurs, that means that we've got to be very intentional with our actions, making sure that we remove unconscious bias and allow women to be in the rooms when these decisions are going to be made, because access is a huge part in being able to get over that broken rung.
Thank you. You talked a little bit about the every 100 men. Research does show that men are often promoted based on potential, while women are expected to demonstrate past performance. Why does that difference still show up in the workplace? Ms. Beattie, what is your opinion on that, and what can leaders do to recognize and interrupt this pattern?
Yes, thank you for that question. We often see the inequities around women needing to show past performance because men are still sitting in those C-suite seats. If we can get women into executive positions, I believe the culture will change because women are naturally more inclusive and collaborative. And I do believe when we are sitting in executive seats that we have a wider vision and a wider look to see who's at the table and who needs to be promoted to the next level.
I think that what ends up happening is if you have less women coming in that are seeking promotion, then obviously that's going to create some huge challenges to your development pipeline, right? When we start talking about how they significantly drop as they move further up into those reigns. And so Miss Beattie is right. You've got to figure out how do you get more representation, because if people see that it is possible, more people tend to enter into that process. And so I think that as we're really thinking about that, we've got to make sure that there are fair and equitable practices in our hiring process, right? I think about hiring almost as a funnel, right? If we only are putting in those male perspectives and we're not putting enough women, then on the back end, when it comes time to get to, hiring those middle managers and those upper managers, obviously that representation makes a really big difference in the talent pool. So we want to make sure that we're being very intentional around hiring the right people on the front end, so that way you have a qualified pool as people begin to move up.
Something that was said, you said something about sponsorship. And so we often talk about a mentorship, and the Chamber has great mentorship programs, but many experts are saying that sponsorship is a difference maker. And so, what's the difference between a mentorship and a sponsorship?
Thank you for asking that question. So, the difference between mentorship and sponsorship is significant. Mentors usually help us work on a particular skill or just overall readiness. They may be familiar with the industry. They may be someone who may be in the company or in the industry, but they are focused on our overall advancement. Now, sponsors are usually people in the organization, and they are looking out for our betterment. They are in rooms talking about us, and we don't even know it. So it's important for us to make sure that if we know we have a sponsor, that they know who we are, that they know our background, that they know what we have actually accomplished so that they can advocate on our behalf.
Absolutely. Charles, so what role can male leaders play as sponsors for emerging women leaders?
I think that it's very important for men in corporate America to really seek out those opportunities to mentor people that are not male. I think that there has to be some intentionality around partnering with those people that you can hold accountable. Because to Miss Betty's point, internally, right, you may want to have a mentor, but mentorship is really about accountability. It's about growth of a skill, right? And when you think about sponsorship is getting out there and screaming their names from the hilltops. And that makes a really big difference, especially in a company culture. So as we think about enough men being intentional around connecting those resources from a sponsorship perspective, and then partnering with our female counterparts to ensure that there's strong mentorship happening, that's really the only way to achieve that goal.
Yes. This question's for both of you. What is one practical step companies can take right now to strengthen their leadership pipeline?
What companies can do to strengthen the leadership pipeline is make sure that they have a budget line for professional development where they actually invest in their people, where they actually have investment money set aside for women to go to conferences, to be able to have and hire executive coaches. And I say that because I am an executive coach. And what I see is when women hire coaches, there is an acceleration that happens that they are able to get ready and to be prepared for that next seat quicker. So having budgets for professional development is critical.
I think that they have to have a process that clearly defines allyship. They have to find a way to get allies involved in sponsorship, measurable goals, because if we put something out there but it doesn't have those measurable goals behind it, it makes it a whole lot harder to achieve them. And then I also think that there's a very strong need for transparent policies. And so if we are transparent about what it is that we are doing and being very intentional about it, just like Miss Betty just mentioned, ultimately we want to make sure that we are putting the right people in the right places to take advantage of the right opportunities. And that's really helps when you talk about trying to eliminate that bottleneck that starts to exist between middle and upper management.
Thank you both for such an insightful conversation. Today's discussion reminds us that leadership equity isn't only about the top of the organization, it starts with the first opportunity to lead. When organizations intentionally build strong leadership pipelines, everyone benefits. The employees benefit, the businesses, and the entire community. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Community Dialogue.
So I just want to say thank you for having me. While I am not directly impacted by this, I understand that my role as an ally is to make sure that we have acceptable practices that help everyone excel in their management. And we realize that there are cultural biases that exist out there that prevent qualified ladies from moving into those extreme leadership roles. And so anything that we can do to ensure that we are intentional around helping them up and supporting them when they're there is so very important. So I'm privileged to be a part of the conversation today. Thank you again for having me. Thank you, Kaiser, for putting this together and being our sponsor. Thank you to the Chamber for making sure that we're keeping these relevant topics at the top of the agenda. And thank you, Ms. Beattie, for your expertise in this space. And thank you, Christy. You've been a wonderful host. So I appreciate being on.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Chamber for this opportunity. I think it's so critical that you raise this issue up. Thank you to the host, Christy. I appreciate you. And thank you, Charles Moon, for your comments and Truist commitment. You men are valuable in making sure that we get to the next step. So thank you so much. And finally, I'd just like to say, I really think that getting to the next step and fixing the broken run is all about community. And that's what we've displayed here. We need colleagues, we need to have advocates, we need to have companies and chambers who understand the critical issues that we're facing today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for Community Dialogue. And thank you as well again to Kaiser Permanente for sponsoring our Community Dialogue.